Hey, what's up you guys? You're watching Team APS, Paul here, and in case you didn't know, a banlist recently dropped. You can check out my video I made recently with my discussion, thoughts, review, all that stuff. Today though, we're going to be talking about what I think are the 5 best meta decks of the format right now. So obviously things will change when Soul Fusion releases and we get more cards for like Dangers or Thunder Dragons, but these are the decks that as of right now seem like the strongest meta picks. And why I didn't put these in any particular order because I feel like that's still very up in the air. We've got YCS Columbus coming up, which we'll be at by the way, so meet us, get one of these cool wristbands. Yeah, so when that happens, we'll maybe have a better, clearer picture of the meta, but for now, these are just the decks in kind of no particular order. So first, Altergeists. This deck did not get hit on the ban list, so comparatively, it's a little bit stronger than all of its rivals. It's still really good. I mean, I don't know. I think that with things like Trickstars maybe being a little bit less utility and like Goki's having a little bit of harder time extra linking, this deck can stand to overpower them a bit more. I do think that the format might be a little bit grindier, and this definitely favors Altergeists. Altergeists, if anything, are a deck that loves to grind. And then their floodgates, you know, of course, are still very powerful. They have access to like Rivalry of the Warlords, very easy for them to use. They've got access to Anti-Spell Fragrance and or Secret Village of the Spellcasters to shut down a lot of the spells from like Sky Strikers and Trickstars and stuff like that. And, you know, they can still run hand traps. They can still run a few other little things they want. So I think this deck will still be quite strong. If anything, maybe it will be kind of in the hot seat, and this means that people will want to side deck against it more. You know, there are still really powerful side deck cards you can use against this. This deck hates Evenly Matched. This deck hates Red Reboot. To some degree, it hates things like, you know, Dinko Sekka, Royal Decree, Heavy Storm Duster, those types of cards. So it's going to be interesting. I do feel like it still has that weakness of kind of being a slower, more like stun control style deck, and those decks have a tough time remaining on the top for a long time. But still, it didn't get hit, so seems like a pretty good pick for me so far. Next is Trickstars. So a lot of people were not pleased with how Trickstars were handled on this ban list. I can't say I was either. The deck got, at worst, I'd say like a slap on the wrist. I mean, these really were minor changes. You know, 2 Scapegoat instead of 3, 2 Terraforming instead of 3. Losing Hornet Drones, I guess, hurts a bit, but I do think this deck is still really powerful. I mean, you know, some people might even call it Trickstars, it's just an engine, but they've still got the same power plays. They've still got Light Stage, Candina, Lycoris. They've still got Reincarnation. They've still got Lilybell. All the things that made Trickstars good are still good. And because it's still more or less the same consistency, I mean, I don't see why this should fall from the competitive ladder very much. This deck will probably still be played the same way. It's still going to have a lot of hand traps. It's still going to be able to tech other engines at once. I'm interested in seeing, you know, what people use to fill some of the lost spaces, but I don't think that Trickstars will need to be very concerned with that. In fact, you know, because Called by the Grave got hit, for example, it's really even harder to have a way to deal with like Lycoris and the regular array of hand traps that Trickstars run. The Droll Reincarnation combo still exists. This deck is, I mean, I don't know, I still think this deck is really very powerful. Perhaps it's going to be easier to side deck against it. You know, maybe like Altergeist, it will get a little bit more like exposure and people will find more ways to side against it. I don't really know. I hate it because, you know, it's also the deck that like exploits time the most, the new time rules. So I guess, you know, find your Hain Wadas, find whatever you can to deal with this deck. It's still here. The same side deck cards that you were using should still work here. I mean, I do think that maybe stuff like Thunder King, which was kind of a strong side against this deck, maybe that can still be pretty good. Hand traps can still hurt it, right? Like if you can hit the right things, you can hit the Terraforming or hit the Candina with certain stuff. I still think that works quite well. I don't know, there's not much more to say about it. It's definitely, like I said in my banlist predictions video, or banlist review video, it's kind of just like an incremental nerf, an incremental power shift, so Trickstars do still seem like they're gonna remain on top. Deck number 3, this is getting really boring. Gokis. I still think Gokis are really gonna be quite good. Because Firewall didn't get banned, this deck can still extra link you. I've actually watched videos already of people extra linking with like Gokis still. I mean, I don't think that anyone thought that that was really dead. Nightmare Goblin's loss sucks. I mean, you know, like you can finally target the extra linked board, so that's nice. But there's still Summon Sorceress, there's still Firewall Dragon, there's still Divine Sword, there's still Goki Rematch, like all this stuff is still here. This deck is still pretty nuts. There's a lot of things it can do. I guess it's maybe like a hair more fragile. But, you know, that's really it. So the same things that you were maybe siding against Gokis will still apply here. You know, if you can draw into your hand traps, that obviously is going to help. Otherwise, you need to have a way to deal with the extra link board. The raw Sphere mode again comes into play, evenly matched comes into play. But yeah, I think this deck will still be quite powerful. I think that Goki players, you know, people who play Gokis are usually pretty good at the game. They're good at memorizing combos at least. So I don't see why this deck can't kind of bounce back and adapt pretty hard. The nerfs hurt it, but I don't think enough that it's just like gonna suddenly fall to the wayside. It's still a lot more consistent than other link spam decks right now, really. I mean, like World Chalice still has its like big glass cannon problem. Spirals kind of suffer from the same thing. Gokis still have all of the Gokis. They still have a lot of the strong cards. So I still see this being a deck that you see a lot of at the top tables and should be adequately prepared to face. Next deck, I think, is Mecha Knight Invoked, or just maybe just Invoked. I'm not really sure. I think that they didn't really get hit on the ban list. I mean, I think the biggest hit that this deck took was terraforming to 2, you know? So that's a thing, and I guess some of the builds did run Hornet drones, but this deck doesn't really lose access to any of its power cards. There are people who thought that Alistair might have gotten hit, but it didn't, so you know, it's still around. This deck still is very consistent. I kind of compare it to Trickstars because they fundamentally work kind of similarly, right? Like, small engines that involve like terraforming and a field spell and a Stratos type monster, and just a lot of hand traps. And the Mecha Knights do give this deck, you know, a bit of push power. So I think that this deck will be a pretty strong pick. It's actually probably what I'm going to be converting over to because I was playing Zephyra, but then, you know, Electromite got limited, so Zephyra's not really a great pick right now. This deck should be pretty good. The best part is that a lot of its competition got relatively nerfed. Goki's a little weaker, Trickstar's a little weaker, Sky Striker's a little weaker. So this deck should still be good. With hand traps not being hit, it means that it can still run the full array of, you know, your Ash Blossoms, your Drolls, your Gammas. So it's probably going to be quite good. I do think though that this deck may still struggle a bit against Altergeist. I think that was kind of one of the deck's tougher matchups. So we'll see where that goes. I'm going to definitely be experimenting with it. It is one of my favorite decks, if a bit boring. But right now it seems like it's going to kind of be at the top of the spots for like sort of more control-y decks since ABCs, you know, lost their spot. Then I think this is a little bit more reliable than things like True Dracos. So, pretty good deck. And last but not least, I think that Sky Strikers, just the pure variant, is still going to be a pretty strong option right now. They did lose Hornet drones, or at least 2 copies of it, but that hurts other decks that teched Hornet drones, I think, a little bit more than it hurts Sky Strikers themselves. So Sky Strikers still have access to 3 Engage, and they still have access to a lot of the same strategies they used before. I mean, Afterburners and Widow Anchor are still very powerful cards. Kagari and whatever the other ones, Shizuku, they're still around. This deck still has access to the annoying Darkest Diablos, a card that actually triggers me a lot. This deck is pretty good. I mean, it's still got like, you know, the Phantom Sky Blaster, like OTK. All those cards still exist. So I do see this being a pretty powerful threat. I'm curious if it will be able to like stick around. Like maybe it won't. It's hard to say. Hornet drones at 1 is still a problem. It means that if that card does get like banished by DD Crow or kind of whatever, things like that, this deck will begin to struggle some, and it did make decent use of like stuff like Scapegoat, so maybe not. But I think it's still going to be really good. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that feels like more reliable or stronger. I mean, there are other decks that kind of came to mind, and I will be talking about those in another video that's kind of more about the rogue options that I think are a little bit better right now. But as of right now, I think this deck kind of takes that last spot. So those conclude the top 5 meta decks of the new format right now, in my opinion. Like I said, this is kind of on impulse. It's still a bit of a knee-jerk thing, but I just can't think of other decks that will do better. That said though, I would be happy for you guys to disagree with me in the comments and let me know what you think will be the best meta decks. obviously a lot's going to change when Soul Fusion drops and we get, you know, new danger cards announced and Thunder Dragons enter the fray. And, you know, there's still like these mystery things like what will heroes do, for example. So it's going to be cool, but right now I have to say I think it's going to kind of be more of the same. As I said in my banlist predictions video, it's just a lot of slaps on the wrist, a little bit of power shifting going on in the upper echelon, but for better or worse, it's kind of the same format. I don't know, we'll see. So let me know what you guys think of the new format, what's going to be good, down in the comments below. And be sure to, if you're going to YCS Columbus, meet us there. You can get one of these awesome wristbands. I'm really excited about these. And you can meet us and say hi and all that stuff. It's going to be fun. All right, that's going to be it. I will see you guys in the next video.